Hey, it's Mosquito, also known as Chris. Welcome to the shop. Jam-packed, still on the table. So that is what we're going to work on today and kind of get things running. I kind of got things running last time, but this time we're going to take a little bit of a look at it running. Kind of talk through some of the issues that I ran into, some of the things that I have to do in order to run this, some of the hardware I'm using, some of the BIOS settings, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to do a little bit of kind of testing with, I'm just going to use TimeSpy. I don't really have anything else, I guess, for it. Eventually I'm going to try and do a little bit more testing with like DaVinci Resolve and see what I can do with that. But yeah, for the most part, that's pretty much what this one's going to be. We'll just run through some of the testing and I'll explain what it is, how it's set up, how it's working, and the pieces that are needed to do that. And then we'll take a look at what's next. So the first thing that I'm working on here is just getting the loop filled up. So I've got everything plumbed up at this point, and I'm just getting the liquid into it so that I can run everything, see how that works. I did end up doing a lot of different things because I couldn't quite find a good way to do it. I don't think I quite found the right place to put that fill port. I did end up basically opening up the GPU port and then was able to fill that way. So that kind of worked out pretty well, and then I was able to top it off with the res. And then I just ran through a TimeSpy with a single GPU just to make sure that things were running and working. So then I put in my riser, more on that later, and got it so that I have both GPUs hooked up. All right, that is a result. So we've got the dual graphics card thing working. A little bit of weird stuff. I did get this 11136 with both GPUs, and that's pretty good, actually. I guess I don't really play games per se, so I'm not exactly sure how that would stack up to a quote-unquote normal setup. I know that I've gotten higher with my Threadripper desktop with both of these GPUs in it, but I mean, you know. So that was with the dual GPU, and now I'm just loading up the benchmark from when I ran it with the single, and I got 6881, so that'd be what, right around 1376 too, so 13,762. Graphics score 6610, so that's what it was at before. And then if I load up the dual again, so obviously it doesn't double the performance. 66, yeah, so I mean it didn't quite double it, but it definitely came up quite a bit. So that is pretty sweet. I don't really know what's going on with it though. I don't know if it's a reporting error or what, but in the BIOS I have it set to X8 by X8. So if I go back to the GPU Z, and this is the second one, this is the first one, it says that the first one is running at PCIe X16 3.0 at X4 3.0, and then the second one says that it's running X16 3.0 at X1 3.0. So according to GPU Z, it seems to think that one of these is running on X1 and the other one is running on X4, but I have a hard time believing that, just because, I mean, running it with a single card, I didn't quite double, but I mean, I'm at like 80%, so I don't know. I feel like that's probably just a reporting error, but I mean, either way, that increase is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just happy that it's working, so time to do a little bit of tweaking with some of that stuff, and then I gotta kind of put things back together. Slightly complicated, very obnoxious thing is right there. That says 700 watts. So that's the old one that I was hoping to replace with this one, 800 watts. However, I had this one installed and I was running it in the system, and I got the dual GPU thing to work. I got everything to boot. I got it to run. I could not run a stress test. For whatever reason, I don't know if I got a bad one or what, but this one, even though it's brand new, I had it all hooked up, had it running a benchmark, TimeSpy, and according to my video, I was shooting a video, because it happened a couple of times, so I was recording video of my kilowatt to see what the actual power draw was, and it was only like 550-ish, 560, somewhere in there, and even when I was running it on this 700 watt, I never saw it go above 580, which is well within what this 800 watt should be able to handle, because the 700 did. Anyway, what was happening is this one would get partway through, it would get, like I said, it was only about 550, 560, and then it would just click and it would turn off. And then I'd have to power cycle it a few times with a power plug, and then eventually I'd get it to boot up again, and I would just do the exact same thing every time I tried to run the benchmark. So that's actually the same problem I had with the 700 watt ATX power supply that I had, which is why I wanted to get this 800 watt, because I was messing around trying to do some overclocking with it just to... Yeah, I've got an ITX system with a single 240 radiator in such a tiny package with two not so lightweight graphics cards, at least on the power draw side, and I'm trying to overclock. Yeah, I realize what that sounds like, but, you know, whatever, you gotta have some fun, right? So anyway, I was running into that same issue with the 700 watt, which is why I wanted the 800, which is kind of why I waited forever until I could find it. So I don't know what's up with that. So that's kind of why everything is all torn apart. Luckily, I was able to just pull the wires out and then take this out. I was worried that because of where it was, I wouldn't be able to get it out with that bracket on it. So I'm just glad that I was able to do that without having to tear the whole thing apart. But yeah, so now I'm going to have to take the SFX bracket off of the 800, put it on the 700. I don't think I'm going to deal with it. I think I'm just going to run with the 700. I know it works. Even if I have to underclock or undervolt a little bit on the GPUs, I'm fine with that. It's a big enough increase over running the single GPU that it's, I don't really care, to be honest. And quite frankly, this is just freaking sweet. It's fun. Yeah, I know I don't play games, so I don't really care about that, but it's, you know, something that may not actually benefit me when I am playing games, given that the only game that I ever play is Age of Empires 2, the original from like the freaking 90s. So not really a big deal. But my hope actually is more for maybe a remote render rig for DaVinci Resolve. I use DaVinci Resolve for editing all my videos. I mostly just care about having the horsepower for computation, I guess. So yeah, I'm just kind of running through some tests with the single GPU first, and I'm going to see kind of what the statistics are for converting this thing, and then I'm going to boot it up with the X8 by X8 and get both graphics cards in there and run a couple of tests with that. So that's kind of where this is. Once I get through some of that, I will get the 700 watt power supply shoved back in this thing, and we will maybe do some final wrap-up stuff. All right, so I've got stuff kind of filled up and ready to rock. The kind of the big question that I got from a couple of different people was, how am I doing the GPU part of it? So I'm running dual, these are Vega 56s. I went with my AMD cards rather than some NVIDIA cards because, one, I had them. They were the most recent graphics card that I had when I started. And two, because then I don't have to have the SLI bridge or the NVLink bridge or any other sort of bridge. I can just use the cards. So yeah, anyway, the couple of things that need to be in place for this to work. Number one, the CPU and the motherboard have to support it. So I'm running an ASRock X470 ITX, whatever that one is, the Fatality board, I think, and Ryzen 3700X. And in the settings of the BIOS, I believe it's the PBS settings, there's an option to select what you want the actual PCI Express slot. Since it's an ITX board, there's only one. how you want that configured. And you need to have that in order to get this to work, obviously, because you have to be able to support what they call it bifurcation. So you have to get that all set up. Obviously, you need the 2 GPUs, and you need some sort of a card that will split the PCIe lanes for you. I've got a couple here. So this was an Amerirack, the model number ARC1PERY423-CX version 1, and this worked for me as well. This is kind of more of a server grade part. It was actually pretty hard to find just by itself. I actually had to contact the manufacturer of it, Amerirack, and essentially just get an invoice and, you know, just say, hey, I want a couple of these, you know, I want one of these and one of those, these lengths, whatever. Kind of tricky to find, but you might notice that the kind of downside to this part is that this is single slot spacing. So what I was originally doing when I had this one is I had that riser cable, and then I had another riser cable attached to it, and I would basically just do this. So I would put the riser in between the 2 GPUs, and then my riser, X16 riser would, yeah. So the thing that I liked about this setup is that it, well, one, it worked. It actually worked a little bit less finicky than the other option that I had, but this is so thin that it was actually a lot easier to get in there. The one that I have in there is just a PCIe extension. I ended up going with an by 16. It's a PCIe 4. I'm not going to tear it out of there because it's kind of a pain, but it's one where the individual pieces are split. So what that means is there's a bunch of different cables instead of just one big one, because I needed to kind of shift it over kind of back just a hair from where the motherboard is so that I could get that in line with this card. And what this card is actually what I'm using, because it's kind of specifically made to do this. And so this is PCIe bifurcation dual GPU right turn dual slot. So the right turn means that I can put it in to that riser like this, so straight from the motherboard, and then I can put this in, and then this is facing the right direction. And importantly, this is spaced out correctly for 2 GPUs. So this was made by a guy named C-Pain on the hard forums, and I actually found him through eBay, but there's a whole thread on the hard forums dedicated to people doing this sort of thing. So that's where I found these, and that is quite nice, because what it allows me to do is just have a short riser tucked in down there, and then I can slot this in the right direction, just like you would a graphics card, because basically as far as the riser is concerned, it is. And then that just slips right onto the GPUs. And this would be a lot easier if I wasn't doing this in an InWin A1 that's nice and full. But yeah, so that's pretty much all there is to it. You pretty much just set up the BIOS, you get that installed, and hope it works, I guess. It works in Windows without any issues. I never actually tried it in Linux, and Unraid server sees both of them, but I was never successfully able to set up a Windows VM with it. So one of the things that I wanted to try and do was take both of these GPUs, or at least one of these GPUs, and do a Windows VM using Unraid, which I think would have been kind of fun, because then I could have had basically, you know, because it's a 3700X, I could have had a pair of quad cores per VM pretty much dedicated to it. And then I've got 16 gigs of RAM, so I could have given each of them 8 gigs of RAM, maybe 6 to make it easier. And then a Vega 56, and I mean, you're not going to run like super heavy games on it, but it'd at least be kind of fun to be able to just show up at a LAN. And well, I guess these days you can't really have LANs anymore, can you? But yeah, anyway, be able to basically run 2 different games or 2 different machines off of one machine would be pretty sweet. But and I've done that in the past. If you want more information on that, you should go check out Level 1 Techs. Wendell did a pretty sweet kind of how-to on a lot of kind of the bifurcation and then IOMMU and hardware pass-through stuff. So he's definitely the right person to go watch for that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it from the hardware standpoint. Let's get you kind of reset and we will take a quick look at the hardware, even though it's sort of a mess up on top. So this is pretty much the final hardware. I do have to get the power supply installed. That goes up here. That's currently sitting on top because I hooked up my 700 watt, bought a different 800 watt. Now everything seems to be happy, so I need to get that reinstalled, rerun the wires, figure out what I'm going to do for wires. I may make my own. I might stick with the kits that come with it. I'm not sure. It depends on how much I can cram above the power supply. I've got the dual graphics cards, that PCIe bifurcation riser card. There's a PCIe 4.0 extension, and the reason I went with 4.0 is just because it was the flexible one that I could find easiest. And I figured, you know, having 4.0 is not a bad thing, even though I don't have PCIe 4.0. It's the Ryzen 3700X and the ASRock X470 ITX, whatever it's called, Fatality. And mentioned that before, obviously I've kind of given the rundown, but the loop order, we have my custom reservoir pump combo that goes right into the radiator. So it comes from here, the pump is up here, straight down into the radiator, through the radiator, and it comes up and through this pass-through. So this is just a 90-degree that goes through the reservoir. There's a kind of a blank section that I didn't turn into a reservoir, and that goes that way and then straight down into the radiator. So it comes out of the radiator, out through here. The in port on the CPU is on the bottom side, and then the out port on the CPU is on the top side of the block. There's another SwiftTech SLI fitting that goes from the GPU block straight up to the GPU in, which is on this side straight through. And then it goes through the GPUs and goes back out on the back side of here. So I am running these in parallel. They are not in series because I just, quite frankly, didn't have enough room to do that, because you need to be able to go in one GPU, out of the other GPU, into the other GPU, and then out. And I did not have the room that I wanted to dedicate. Plus, this is a lot kind of cleaner, I think, of a setup, because all of the plumbing is on the back side of the GPUs. Kind of gives the effect like, how are these things in there? But it does work perfectly fine. The other reason I wanted to do parallel is because I've got the pump, and this is actually a decent amount of stuff for that pump to be kind of pushing stuff through. So I wanted to make sure that I made the flow a little bit easier by decreasing the pressure, because I'm running through both blocks simultaneously rather than one and then the other. So all of that basically to say, comes in, goes through both, comes out, goes back down this top one, and this fitting goes right back into the reservoir, does it all over again. And then I've got my Hardware Labs GTX, GT something. It's a Nemesis GTR, that's what it is. And then on the bottom, I've just got those Arctic fans. And then one Silverstone slim fan back there. It's maybe a third blocked by the radiator, but quite frankly, that's fine, because the side of the radiator gets warm too. And I just wanted to have some air blowing into the case just to try and get some of it to circulate, because I'm going to be blocking a lot of it off. Once the side panel goes back on and the top panel goes on, it's going to kind of block a lot of the airflow. So I wanted to have that fan drawing air in. I know I could push the air back out and push the air up through the radiator, but I don't know. Quite honestly, I just wanted to pull the hot air out of the case and out the bottom, and it does work pretty well. I can kind of throw up some test numbers and kind of show you that. But yeah, it's a pretty sweet little build, honestly. I'm pretty happy with it. I just need to do all the final buttoning up and get this thing wrapped up. Hey, so yeah, that's basically that running. I'll probably do a little bit more tweaking to it later and see what I can do just to maybe optimize things a little bit better. But yeah, so everything's working again, finally. And I think in the next one, I got a handful of parts still left to do. I got to put the cover plate on the back of the GPU. I have to finalize the wiring. Obviously, I have to get the power supply put back in. I have to get the pump actually wired in because right now it's just on a power adapter externally. Let's see, I need to clean up the bench. Oh, the top panel. I need to kind of finalize the top panel. So get that all finished up, put back together. And let's see. Other than that, that's pretty much all I really need to do to get this thing buttoned up, I guess. So I think that's something that we'll look forward to on the next one, and maybe start looking at some other stuff to do to this thing. So as always, I appreciate those of you that stuck around, and if you like what you saw and you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next one.